at 5 o'clock, I will definitely canvass the candidates to see if they'd like to take a couple more questions or not, if it's still going on. But our intention was to have it be around an hour. And if the candidates do not want to continue, well, then we'll quit. I'm going to see if I can get my stuff into. There should be a way to get the gallery view.
So, Bill, I don't think Fred can hear yet. So he's still working on the audio on his side.
You know how to do gallery view?
Click on speaker view and gallery view will come up. If you go up to the upper right, click on, if it says speaker view, click on speaker view and you'll get gallery.
Where to maximize your screen.
Okay, good. Thank you. No, we're good right now. I have 4 o'clock, so I'd like to begin. Thank you all for coming to the Northport Village Corporation Candidates Forum. Blair Einstein is the chair of the nominating committee, and he's had a family emergency. He had a death in the family, and he and Beanie have left they're on their way to South Bend, Indiana to attend the burial service. So he has asked me to preside in his stead. The forum is intended to provide an opportunity for candidates to introduce themselves and an opportunity for voters to ask them questions. Just as a reminder, this is not a meeting of any Northport Village Corporation entity, and we're not here to share our views on various issues, but rather to ask questions of the candidates and hear what they have to say. After the introductions, each candidate will have first an opportunity to introduce him or herself. After the introductions, we'll start the question period. Those of you whom I can see, raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, and I will call on you, and then the Northport Village Corporation host will unmute your microphone. Please make your questions as brief as possible. And also for the candidates, if you would make your answers brief, then we can accommodate as many questions as possible. If you want to address your candidate to a specific candidate, your question to a specific candidate, you can do that. But every candidate for that position will have an opportunity to answer each question if they so choose. Now, if you're on a telephone or are otherwise not visible and you would like to email me a question, you can email me a question at wcressey, that's WCRESSEY, @gmail.com. So we'll schedule the meeting scheduled to last about an hour, and we'll see what we can accomplish in that period. So I would like to start with Wendy Huntoon, who's the candidate for treasurer, and then I will also ask the 4 candidates there are 2 overseers positions to be elected, and we have 4 candidates, and I will ask the overseers to also make a brief introductory statement. So Janae, you have the floor. Wendy, you have the floor.
Hi, I'm Wendy Huntoon, and I'm one of the candidates for the treasurer position. I live at 78 Broadway. As many of you know, I'm Joe Huntoon's daughter. So I must say, for my entire life, I've pretty much seen how the Village Corporation works. I just stepped down as the president and CEO of a nonprofit of Pennsylvania, so feel I have more time now to actually devote to a position like this. And in my role as CEO and president, one of my biggest responsibilities was understanding the finances for the organization. So I think that puts me in a good position to be in the treasurer's position. So I'll keep it short, Bill.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Casey Brown, please.
Okay, hi everyone. Good afternoon. First, thanks so much for everyone coming out today. It's really great to see all the community involved like this. And let me just say, I think, you know, the candidates you have to choose among are all great. I know they really care about the village, and there's really no bad choices there. So who am I? I'm Casey Brown. You can call me Casey. I'm a professor at the University of Massachusetts in civil and environmental engineering. I've been coming to Bayside my whole life. My first summer was in utero, actually, and I've been up here most years since. Recently, we've been lucky enough to buy a house on Shore Road, and we're just thrilled that we can spend so much more time up here now. Why am I running? 3 quick reasons. One is I'm just a big believer in public service. I spent 6 years on active duty in the Air Force because I wanted to serve my country. I work at a public university now in a field that is dedicated to reducing our impacts on the environment in terms of infrastructure. And I feel I've been a beneficiary of all the public service that has taken place in the village before, and I would like to serve the village now. I have a lot to offer, I think, in terms of being an overseer. I, as an environmental engineer, have a good understanding of infrastructure. I include both built and natural infrastructure. I think the Bay is an important part of our infrastructure, and we should see it that way. I think I can be a bridging person. I'm someone who sails, who runs, who fishes. I don't do any of those things well, but I do them all. And so I think I can see things from a variety of viewpoints when issues come up for the village. I have some experience as a public speaker and engaging the community, and I think communities in general in my role as a professor and researcher. And so I think that can be a strength in terms of the communications that we need with both within the community and beyond. Finally, I'll just say that this community has been a blessing for me my whole life, and I want to just ensure that it remains that way going into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Fred Lincoln, please.
Great. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Fred Lincoln. Bill, I first wanted to start off to thank Blair and you for all the work with the nominating process and for kind of level setting everything for today. And Casey, I agree with you. I think all the candidates here would be, none of them would be a bad choice. So I would definitely echo your comments there. So anyway, yeah, Fred Lincoln. So my family's residence, which I am the proprietor of now, is at 54 Broadway. So I'm just past Murphy Square, kind of between Murphy Square and Wendy's house, past Sue Fleming's, kind of down in that little area. I have also, like Casey, been coming Bayside my whole life. I don't know if I was here, before it be conceived here, but I did come here. My first visit to Bayside was at 2 months old. And so you can kind of do the math on that. But I've been coming to Bayside my entire life. I have not missed a summer yet. Of course, I've gone off and worked and had a professional career and not able to get here some years as much as others, but that actually will be changing as I plan to retire in the coming months, which is a very exciting time for me personally, but also I feel that I've watched all of these wonderful people do this amazing work with the village through the past several decades. I mean, I remember times back in the past when we were almost on life support as from the infrastructure perspective, and I've just seen all the hard work that's gone in to it. And I feel, not only do I feel obligated to step up to the plate and to pitch in and roll up my sleeves and like do some heavy lifting, but it's something I would like to do as well. What's good for me is, I grew up, the friendships that I've made, most of them are close friends of mine here today. I mean, we all know how Bayside perpetuates that. And I feel my growing up and experiences in Bayside has been directly relevant to the man I am today and what I've been able to accomplish because of all these wonderful experiences that I've had not only in being present in the village, but also with all these amazing people that I've come to know. So professionally, I work for Raytheon Technologies. I've been in the company for 32 years, did a few years before that at General Dynamics. So my background is in Department of Defense. I'm in the finance end of it. My current role is I work for the corporate office in our compliance organization, and I support our intelligence and space business unit. I live in Arlington, Massachusetts when I'm not in Bayside, although I say Bayside is my home. I live here with my partner, Matt, and our 2 cats. And I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to be speaking with everybody today. Thank you.
Thank you. Janae Novotny, please.
Thank you all for being here. I never thought I would say this, but after listening to the other candidates, I feel like a Bayside baby. I've only been coming for 30 years and owned a cottage on Park Row for 20 years. And I recently had the great joy of retiring, of moving here. So I'm now a full-time resident here in Bayside. And I have always thought about actually contributing back to the community, to the Bayside community that's given me so much over the years. And I started thinking about participating in the Village Corporation before I retired. When I got here this last fall, I started attending overseers meetings in person and then virtually. I've attended a variety of the committee meetings to get a sense of how the committees function. And I've also been volunteering in the office on a weekly basis. So I'm really, whatever happens, I'm committed to volunteering and supporting the Village Corporation in any way I can. In terms of my background, I retired after 40 years as a lawyer representing public agencies like towns, cities, colleges, community colleges, counties, special districts, things like that, even sewer and water districts. And I have a good sense of how public agencies operate. I've served as general counsel to some smaller public entities where I'm from. And I really appreciate the work that public agencies do on our behalf. And as I said, I will continue to volunteer for the village in one way, shape, or form. I think that also in my work as a lawyer, I spent a lot of years doing some labor and employment law. So I was negotiating on behalf of public employers with the unions that represented their employees. And I think that being able to negotiate labor contracts sort of represents how I approach problem solving. Listening, I'm a good listener, listen to everybody's concerns and sort of work cooperatively and collaboratively to get people to a place that meets everyone's interests. And I think I would bring that to any work that I was able to do on your behalf as an overseer. So that's really what I have to offer as an overseer. Thank you all again for being here.
Thank you. Michael Terrell.
Thank you, Bill. I would say, Bill, you're more Jim Lehrer than George Stephanopoulos in this role, so it's good to see. I should say, too, that we have great candidates, and it's so good to see it for these 2 open positions, Casey, Fred, Janae. As for me, I'm currently on the board, which some of you or many of you may know. I've been on the Board of Overseers since 2018. In terms of Bayside specifics, we have Terra Cottage, the house next to the yacht club. I say we, because I own Terra Cottage with my partner of 32 years, Carlos Martinez. We've been coming to Bayside for 20 years. And we bought our cottage in 2016. In terms of my professional background, I have my own business of 20 years. It's a consulting practice in communications, which is, I do strategy with clients globally. I work at the intersection of organizational strategy, brand communications, marketing, and public relations. In terms of my service, I've served on the safety committee and the tree committee prior to becoming an overseer. When I was asked to run for the board in 2018. I was elected at that annual meeting. I'm currently chair of the safety committee, and I serve on the personnel committee and the tree committee. I chaired the coronavirus or COVID-19 task force, which was a 6-week process of public hearings to get the village ready for what was emerging in March into April as the pandemic, and then as we approached the season. Perhaps you've heard of that work. Being an overseer, it's an enormous honor and a lot of hard work. It's a lot more work, in fact, than I thought it would be, and I say that willingly, but realistically. I see it as balancing interests and advocacies. In a sense, though, being an overseer is just one part of the way things are done around here. So much work gets done on committees, as it should be. Boards like this are really set up to do what boards can do, and so much of the work needs to be done at committees, and then the committees bring full recommendations to the board. It's the best way for this kind of system to function. So committee work, of which many people, perhaps in attendance tonight, are part of, is an essential part of being active in the village as well. I also see being an overseer as honoring the traditions. As we know, Bayside has so many traditions, while also looking for ways to do things differently, better, more efficiently, with fiscal prudence, of course. We, if you've been part of, or if you've watched any of the quite long meetings that are recorded, you see how careful we are around fiscal planning, and that is, of course, huge and very important. I also see it as a willingness to put in a lot of hours, many more than people realize, which I touched on earlier. My personal posture about being a board member is I always assume that people know a lot. People here have a lot of deep and grounded wisdom about what this village is, what it needs to be, and also how it can shift. I always believe that I'm balancing what I know with that and contributing where I can. I believe in being deeply collaborative. I believe I have been, and honoring the fact that there's a process. It's not a lever pull, it's a process. And sometimes that process is quite slow. Often it results in people disagreeing, and that's the way it probably should be if it's running efficiently and running right. So we all know that Bayside is a very unique place, goes without saying. We all know that we aren't without our challenges. Some of them are about how we evolve the village and the village structure, the managerial structure of the village, perhaps. And that's what some of us have started to look at in the personnel committee, especially. But honoring the balance is important. I always say that Bayside has very long and deep traditions, but it's actually quite, it strikes a very delicate balance. Not that the village is delicate, but the way we honor who we are and where we're going is a very delicate balance. And we saw some of that this year with the coronavirus work. Certainly those 6 weeks hearings were very balanced and effort at honoring the fact that we had a lot of different voices. And I thought that was a very interesting process and very typical of Bayside. So I look forward to further dialogue, and I thank you for making time to hear us all today.
Thank you, all of you. Just to reiterate, for those of you who may have joined late, we'll now have a question and answer period. If you wish, you may address your question to a specific candidate. If you just ask a question and don't address it to a specific candidate, I'll do a kind of a rotation, not starting with the same person each time, but sort of rotating around. And I will try to flip back and forth between screen 1 and screen 2, so be a little patient. If you raise your hand and I don't see you immediately, I will see you eventually. So the floor is now open, and please keep your questions brief. Thank you very much. The floor is open. Who would like to ask a question? Okay, the screen name is Diane Hunting, but I assume this is Jim Hunting. Would you unmute his microphone, please?
Okay, I'm unmuted. First of all, I want to thank all the candidates for participating, and I certainly have learned a lot from all of you. Secondly, and perhaps this is a positive effect of COVID-19, this was a great way of introducing the candidates to the community. We normally don't have this kind of interaction, and I found it to be a very, very positive. The question I have, and it may be more philosophical, is how do each of the candidates for overseers see Bayside and Northport Village Corporation a year from now with all that's taken place with COVID, infrastructure, et cetera?
Thank you. So we'll start this time with Fred Lincoln, please.
Okay, great. That's a good question, Jim. So I think all of us on this call would love to know exactly how Bayside and the rest of the world will be a year from now. We obviously don't know that. I would kind of go back and reiterate something I said earlier in my introduction about all the hard work that's been done by the past boards and overseers. I mean, going way back to people like Stan Brown, Bobby Webster, Mabel Wadsworth, Jerry Savitz, and Joe Huntoon, many others. And I think all of the work that those people did has helped us be able to respond more effectively to this amazing challenge that we're facing now with COVID. I'm a realistic thinker, but I also am think positively. And I think with the waterfront infrastructure work that's coming up now, that's giving us all something to look forward to for next year when we come back, and to kind of like see how that integration is going to unfold as we get back to whatever our new normal will be. So I will be, as Janae said earlier too, regardless of whether I am voted in or not as an overseer, I plan to be around and help with the transition as we move forward and get out of this very challenging time.
Thank you, Fred. Janae Novotny, please.
A year from now, I know what I hope. I mean, first of all, I think we can look forward to the new seawall being constructed, a new chlorination building, and I really hope that we're back to the swimming dock being in, because there's a virus and we're sort of over although I gather that the thought is that the virus will be with us for quite a while. There will be a vaccine, that's what I meant. And that we're back to a more sort of a more normal summer that people come to expect and love in Bayside. But regardless of what it is, I will be here, and regardless of my role, I'll be doing what I can to support and sustain Bayside.
Thank you. Michael Terrell, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I would amplify that. I think that I hope that, sounds like a dog just got hit. I hope that we are back to normal. Wouldn't that be great for the whole world to be done with this? The likelihood of that is getting thinner and thinner, as we see. The latest I've seen is the expectation that some version of vaccines will be available in some manageable way. And the timing around that is anyone's guess. I think we'd end up in the village having another process around how do we want to address where we are at that stage, let's say going into next season. I hope that we can get back to the way we were and have been, with everybody enjoying Bayside to its fullest, and not with all these variations on restrictions and allowances this year that we have this year. We do have some challenges coming up in terms of balancing everything, though. The seawall going in, and the work that will start this fall around that, and the utility building, et cetera, and balancing how that all comes to pass at the start of next season and how it all wraps up. Should be interesting. I hope that we don't also have to manage a COVID-19 process around that. And Jim, I think, I won't ask you a question of your question, but I think you were asking mostly around COVID, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Casey Brown, please.
Great, thanks. Yeah, a great and challenging question, Jim. I think I agree with the others that we want to hope for the best, but we have to prepare for the worst. And my sense is that the virus is not going away anytime soon. We can hope that it does, but we're going to be living for this, with this for a long time, I think. And we have to develop strategies that can adapt as the situation completely or continuously evolves. I think it's only one of the many challenges that we have. I think, as others have mentioned, there's major construction going on, and we have to hold people accountable as they do this work and make sure that the work that they complete aligns with our plans and what we're expecting to see. So I think that's another serious challenge. So my hope is that we all do that work, that we have a successful construction season, really. Certainly hope that the virus goes away or is managed through a vaccine. I think my most important hope, though, is that we have good communication and good engagement for the community, because I think, you know, the biggest threat that we face in Bayside isn't any of those single issues. Just making sure that we stay strong as a community, and for the entire community to feel that they are behind decisions, or at least understand decisions, and they're engaged in the process, I think is really the most important thing, whatever the challenge is. I mean, who knows what it could be next year? And I think the strength of the community and strength of communication and engagement is what will prepare us for whatever comes.
Thank you. The question was addressed to overseers, but I would like to give Wendy Huntoon a chance to weigh in on the same topic if she'd like.
Sure. So, and one of the things I'll address, just that Steve Katsalonis has done a fabulous job as the treasurer the past, I don't know, 6 or more years. So what I actually plan to do, so thinking about where we are next year, what I want to do is build on what Steve has done in terms of making sure that the Village Corporation continues to be fiscally sound. As you all know, we have infrastructure projects that are going on this year that have to be tracked and managed appropriately, and we have a great, group of people in the office, as well as a group of overseers that are doing that. COVID has been a big challenge in terms of having to do things electronically. So again, building off the work that Steve has done with the existing overseers and with Nina, we're looking at putting in place some new practices that allow us to perform some of our work remotely and electronically, which I think will, in the long term, help the Village Corporation be more efficient from a practice and procedures, especially a financial practice and procedure standpoint.
Thank you. Who would like to ask a question? Just going to check the other screen. Oh, David Crowfoot, please. Beverly Crowfoot is the screen name. Wait, David, you're not unmuted yet. Nina, have you unmuted him, or is he maybe muted at his end?
He's muted on his end.
Okay, I think it's, start over again, David.
Okay. We all know that we're here in the summer, but that Bayside goes on in the winter. And although I don't entirely love Zoom meetings, I have found that Zoom meetings do allow better citizen participation in the different meetings that we have. But having people physically here is very important when you get back to having real meetings. And just having people who are here in the winter who can intervene when crisis arises is also important. I just wonder whether the candidates have special views about how the winter goes and how you go about attending meetings, and will we still be doing Zoom meetings at this time next year?
We'll start with Janae Novotny, please.
Well, I live here year round now, so I will certainly be present for whatever is needed in terms of an overseers. I know that at least I recall that the overseers as long as they can make a quorum here, a physical quorum here, once we're back to physical meetings, then other overseers can participate by phone. So I will be here. I know that there's, having spent my first winter here, there's certainly, Bayside does not sort of pull up the covers and go to sleep during the winter, and there are needs that arise, and I will be present to help in any way I can.
Michael Terrell, please.
Thanks for the question, David. There is a question, isn't there, about whether or not Zoom meetings will continue where we are and how the state will honor quorum rules, et cetera, going forward. But leaving that aside, I mean, in my 2 years as part of the process, I've missed one meeting, I think, and but no more than one. And my understanding is when John Squitz tries to figure out who's going to be in what meeting, you know, in the next, say, meeting next month or the month after, we do try to balance to make sure that there's going to be quorum and that we have voting in place with with people here physically. The work that I'm mostly part of is not heavily impacted in the winter, which is only at the committee level. That's safety, personnel, and tree. Yet the board does obviously have lots of managerial and oversight responsibilities for things that go on throughout the whole year. Bill Page does an excellent job at keeping everything running and keeping us all informed. There is always that pressure, though, around if you ended up with a board with too many people who couldn't make meetings, who couldn't make the physical meetings. Yes, we would be in a bind. In that case, I would come to more meetings physically in the winter. It hasn't been an issue up to now with the current construction of the board, the current makeup. And I'm here pretty much from May through October. So that time frame, I'm physically at meetings.
Thank you. Casey Brown, please.
Sure. Thanks, David, for your question. I think I mentioned that I'm a professor. And so for those of you who don't know, I don't have a real job. And it gives me a lot of flexibility to be able to get up here when I would need to get up here. I think it would be no problem for me to be physically present. Our cottage is winterized, and I have family and friends around who've let it be known that I can stay there whenever I need to. So I think, like others have said, I'll ensure that there's a physical quorum if there needs to be. I'll just add a little bit on that, is that it's a big issue in many ways to have a board that is serving a community, and David will correct me if I get these numbers wrong, that's about 350 households, and just a small fraction of those live there year round. And I think makes it a very difficult job for the board, and something we just have to be conscious of. It's exactly right. We need people there year round. We need them represented on the board, but we need the whole community also represented on the board. And that's where I think communication and engagement with all the households here is very important. Thanks.
Thank you. Fred Lincoln, please.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, David. And that is a valid point that you bring up. I think, in some cases, some of us may feel a little bit overly comfortable because we know people like Beverly and you are around, and that, that you're kind of the, when other people can't be available, that you're sort of the adult supervision. But that is valid point about, the people only having, maybe sometimes overlooking the fact that there are winter residences, and and having that balance, and that's something important. And as an overseer, I would make sure that I was always cognizant of that balance and looking at the perspective of the folks like you who are reside in Bayside year round. As far as my physical attendance at the meetings when that comes back up, I don't see that as an issue. I currently live in Massachusetts, but for full transparency, my partner and I do own a house in Southern California. We are planning, as I mentioned earlier, I'm planning to retire within the next few months here. My plan will be to be in Bayside from May to October and be in California for the majority of the time from November through April. With that being said, I have a lot of family here in the Northeast in New England. Both of my parents are still living. My mother is 91. I'm not leaving town and not looking back. I don't see my being at a scheduled meeting or even an emergency meeting with some advance notice being physically present an issue. I travel extensively with my job now all over the country and up until the COVID started, of course. And not to sound complacent, but I mean, my getting on a plane in Los Angeles and flying to Boston and driving up to Maine, I don't really see that as a huge chore, at least for myself now. I might think differently if I was on the board in 20 years. But I tend to look for any excuse in the wintertime to get to Bayside anyway. So I think this, selfishly speaking, the meetings would serve as a nice catalyst for me to be up in Maine more often in the wintertime. I actually, as much as I love Maine in the winter, excuse me, in the summer, I think winter is very special too. And I would look forward to being physically present at the meetings during the winter months as well.
Thank you. Wendy Huntoon?
Sure. So I don't, as the treasurer, I don't actually count as a quorum.
Right.
But my goal would to be present as many meetings as possible. I was on the overseers for a couple of years, and I did make most of the meetings flying up from Pittsburgh. As many of you know, my 92-year-old father lives in Belfast. So I am up here quite a bit to see him. The other thing, and I think that we found with the COVID situation, that it's important to be able to accommodate the remote participation as well. Many of you may know I actually worked remotely up here in Maine every summer since 1997. So for many of you that might seem pre-internet, but that was the field that I was in. I managed a group of 15 people, and throughout my career, I brought in over $30 million of funding from the National Science Foundation. And then when I was the president and CEO of the nonprofit, I worked here every summer and managed a small nonprofit that had a budget of over $6 million. So again, I think being present in person is very important. But I also know that if you put the appropriate process and procedures in place, that you can manage with not everybody being present. And as I saw when I was on the overseers, sometimes it's the people from away who actually end up being at the meeting sometimes, just because they're able to plan their schedule as such. And so when the overseers were meeting, often it was some of the locals that had conflicts and had to call in. So again, I don't think that living here precludes me from, or not living here precludes me from being able to do the treasurer's job. Thanks.
Thanks. Who would like to ask a question? Now, let me just check the other screen here. The floor is open. I don't have anything by email, but again, those of you who are not visible, you're welcome to submit a question by email. I hope this means that we're giving people the information that they need. I'm not seeing any hands. If you're raising your hand and I'm not seeing you, wave it wildly so that I pick up on it. Oh yes, here we go, Joe Riley. It says Paula, but I see it's Joe. Oh, you were unmuted for a while. There you go.
My question is, I think Vicki and Lisa and the tree committee have done a great job dealing with the dreaded caterpillars this year. And I know we have a diminishing budget. So how do you foresee, even five, see us figuring out how to deal even more with the caterpillars next year? As a person that was totally covered with the rash, I'd love to know what people are thinking.
Thank you. Excellent question. We will start with Michael Terrell, please.
Joe, did you say was covered? Because I'm still over here scratching. You know.
I know, it's mostly gone away.
Yeah. Well, we on the tree committee yesterday had a presentation from the the proposed tree contractor to come next in the next spending go around to spray, and that process, as I understand it, would begin. And this is for the village trees, park trees, a limited number of them. And it's, as I understand it, and Vicki is here, she could probably speak to it. It's to spray pretty much what was done last year, but to do it differently and with somebody who's a bit more responsive. So that's one piece, and I forget the number, the budget number there. Is it Vicki, somewhere in the 6s, 7s, 5? It's going down. Okay, can I get a 4? Okay, so that's one piece. Yeah, that's one piece of the spending. And you know, the truth of the matter is, so much was, the difference was made up last year in terms of what was done by voluntary donations, and that's certainly being talked about. The advisor, the tree expert yesterday said the 3rd and 4th year of this is, in the way they analyze these, are expected, those are the toughest years, and we're going into what, the 3rd or 4th year, one of those, so the 4th. Yeah, Vicki's helpful in this conversation because she's prompting. But yeah, so we're not through it, and that is both for our health and the tree's health. So there's that balance, and you know, it's going to come down to how to do that with individual spending, some fundraise spending, and some village spending. I think it's not wise to think that the village can eradicate this unless we want to look at taxes going through the roof. This is a natural thing that needs to be.
We already have that.
No.
Sorry.
But there's that balance, and we need to protect the trees, and we need to protect the village trees. There's only so much we can do. Obviously, there's only so much we can spend. And the good news is there's only so many years they're going to be around. We are going into the worst of them, though. And people are going to have to make individual choices about what risks they're going to take on their own properties. Also, I'm sure Vicki's going to go through this with more communication and alacrity later, but the spray and how it's managed, the insecticide and how it's managed, and how pets are managed, and how we look after each other's pets, and how we give notice to each other if we're spraying our property and others have pets. All of these things need to be balanced and weighed. But it's very real. And what comes next is the ash borer, which Vicki will tell us about in the coming years, which is the insect that's going after the ash trees. So no, it's a lot of talk and not one answer, Joe, is where I'm coming down. We have a process around it, but to expect that it's village spending only, I would be very surprised if there was anything close to agreement there to have any more than what we've already spent go towards this.
Thank you. Casey Brown, please.
Yeah, great question. I think we have them bad here. I've got the rash. My kids have the rash, so we're definitely feeling that pain. I'm actually interested in going with some neighbors to get some spraying done here. We can do that Zoom call after this, I guess. From my standpoint, you know, it is an issue of thinking carefully about what the environmental impact of this spraying. You know, I'm very concerned about the ecological health of our community and of the bay as well. And so, but I think it is a priority, and I think it's appropriate for the village to take action on this because it's impacting so many people in the village. So when we do that, sure, we have to think about the finances, what the budget we have available, realize where it's necessary for private individuals to account for their own trees. And just, you know, think very carefully about how we communicate to the village in terms of the timing and the possible impacts of spraying if that's the route that's chosen.
Thank you. Fred Lincoln, please.
Yes, hi. Thanks for the question, Joe. And I, like probably almost everybody on this Skype session, experienced the repercussions of the of the caterpillars firsthand myself. Several of my sisters and I happened to be up one weekend where I think it was at the peak, and we all left Bayside almost in tears. So I definitely get it. Even though I am by nature fiscally conservative, and the last thing I want to do is try to make suggestions without looking at other alternatives that are going to increase the expenses of the village and possibly ultimately raise taxes, which is not what I would want to do. With that being said, and this is by no means meant as any criticism on Vicki Matthews or her committee, and it's easy enough for me to make comments, and I wasn't even involved in it. I do personally think that there needs to be more attention devoted to it next year earlier, and possibly a little bit more spending. As Casey mentioned too, that I think there needs to be a little bit more information that the overseers can put out to the community, saying, not only with fundraising and look at applying for funds, but also things like what individual households could do if they banded together and said, we have this contractor and they'll come down, and if we can guarantee them so many trees or so many households or amount of land, however we would have to measure it, that maybe we can get some cost savings there and have people individually pay. I know I had speaking with some people. I know there were certain people in the village that didn't understand why certain areas were being treated and others weren't. I'm sure that they were very logical and well thought out reasons for that. But again, getting back to the communication and the sharing of the information, if we can let people know what's going to be happening, and then what they as individuals can also do, and how we can maybe get some cost savings together by working together on getting in front of it, and hopefully having it not be as invasive as it was last year, or this past season, excuse me. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed that their cycle is going to be dwindling down.
Yes.
Thank you. Janae Novotny, please.
Actually, the answers to this excellent question make me realize that I think that maybe we need to do, the village somehow needs to do some work on making sure people understand all the ways that the village does communicate about what's going on, because both through, it was my experience anyway, that both just paying attention to the overseers and Dan Webster's website, because he does such a generous community service by posting so many things that the overseers share. There was a lot of communication that I saw anyway about the brown-tailed moth issue, about what people could do about it, about what the village was doing about it. And I'm not quite sure why. I think maybe sometimes until you actually start scratching, then people realize there was more to pay attention to. So maybe on the general communication issue that people have talked about, somehow if there's a way that we can remind villagers of all the ways that they need to be following on their own, or paying attention to the communications that the village does put out. But I thought that that actually the overseers and the tree committee, they did, within the financial resources that were available, they're very thoughtful about picking which areas of village property to treat. Again, I'm sorry that people didn't read or weren't aware of the communication. And I'm also very glad to have heard, based on the one tree committee that meeting I actually was able to attend, that the tree committee is always already looking forward to and planning on protecting our ash trees from the menace that's on its way.
Thank you. Wendy
Oh,
Huntoon,
yeah,
please.
thanks.
Sure. So, my role isn't to, since I won't be an overseer, I'm just the treasurer. For me, it will be to, understand the priorities for the villagers and the overseers and make sure that they're implemented appropriately within the budget. With my involvement with the village corporation, it often comes down to this: money and priorities. So I'm going to say back to you, Joe, and the rest of the villagers that, part of this is you speaking up and indicating where are the priorities for the village corporation and where do we want their money spent, our money spent. So last year, I believe the villagers raised $12,000 to actually put towards, treating the brown-tailed moth. I think we have less in the budget for next year. I think it's $5,000. The expectation is that it will cost less, assuming that we spray. But again, I think this is where the villagers, by being informed, can help the overseers actually implement, the policies and the practices and spend the money where they think it can be best spent. And I just wanted to clarify one thing that I said before. I may not have been clear. When I was talking about, sort of remote participation in the village corporation meetings, I wasn't implying that that's, the way that the overseers should go. I know that Maine law doesn't actually allow for that. And as the treasurer, again, I don't qualify as part of the quorum, and so it's a little different for me.
Thank you. Who would like to ask a question? Check the other screen. I'm not seeing anyone who hasn't asked a question, so I'm going to call on David again. Go ahead, David.
I wonder whether the various candidates could talk about our relationship with the town of Northport.
Relationship with the town of Northport. We will start with Casey Brown, please.
Great. Thanks, David, with another great challenging question. I think it's a very interesting situation where we are a sub part of another town where we manage the infrastructure of part of that town, and there's a financial exchange that is in response to that. I also understand that the town of Northport is potentially interested in reducing that financial support. So I think it's vitally important. We're dependent on them. We're part of the town. They determine a lot of the things that affect us, such as the health of the bay to some extent as well. And so I think it's going to be very important for the Board of Overseers to establish and continue good communication with the town. And it's something that I would like to prioritize. I want to comment also on this question of communications. I think it's a real challenge, because we're such a dispersed community for much of the year, because people don't pay attention until something really affects them. And so I hope that we've learned so much this summer about how effective Zoom is to reach people. And I hope that we can find ways. I'm not talking about formal meetings, but the other issue is that we have a volunteer who provides the primary communication for the village, and that could end at any time. And so I think, to me, that's really the biggest concern. Certainly communication with Northport is very important, but to be very strong, and when we communicate with Northport, we have to be very solid as a community, I think. And that means communicating well with all of us and strategies that work for a very dispersed community for much of the year. Thanks, David. Great question.
Thanks. Fred Lincoln, please.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Yeah, so I feel that the Board of Overseers has been working very hard to forge strong relationships with the town of Northport. I'm sure that's been challenging, and I'm sure I don't know half of the dialogue of what's gone on in the past. I do think that we, as it was mentioned, that we are clear at ensuring that Northport understands what we, as the village, what we provide as part of the subset of Northport, and how that benefits the whole town, and not just focused or having the perception of it only focusing on the village or primarily the community. I think too, it's just, you know, it may be a matter of, you know, we have to respect diversity of thought. I mean, people have different points of view for different reasons, their background, what their living conditions are, what they're seeing. And what I would like to do as part of the board of overseers is look to see, identify and target even those perceptions, even though we may not agree with them, of where there may be some negativity, and work on shoring up those perceptions and turning them from negatives to positives, and just working it that way. And I'm sure a lot of this has happened in the past, but we of course have more to go there.
Thank you. Janae Novotny, please.
I think that my limited understanding really is that the village does work on its communication with the town. We have a representative from the Board of Overseers who attends town meetings, I believe. But I just think it's an ongoing communication that we can't let up on, because as new selectmen are elected, they don't have the history of the relationship between the village corporation and the town. And so every time there's an election, maybe you lose some of that history. And for example, they might not be totally ignorant of the reason for the contribution back to the village corporation of the annual amount that was reduced this year, that was all based on the village corporation really stepping up some years ago and increasing its, sort of, as I understand, I could have the terminology incorrect, but really increasing its contribution back to the town in order to help the town rebuild Drinkwater School when it burned down some years ago. And I think it's that kind of history that maybe it's just all ongoing communication. We have to keep making sure that any new select people that are elected understand and appreciate the role, the sort of mutual role between the village and the town.
Thank you. Michael Terrell.
Thank you. Yeah, excuse me. That's a great and ongoing and often unseen issue, David. It certainly around for many villagers who are only focus on Bayside in terms of Bayside, but it's a big one. Like for instance, this year we have funding in the neighborhood of $25,000 that we would get from the town, and the town has decided to reduce that. Now, if that is, I don't know if that's a final decision, but if that does go forward, that has direct impact on our fundraising for our tax, our annual meeting, what we raise for taxes and how that hits our property taxes this year. So that's a big one. And we also have, you know, Janae spoke of it, there's every session, the board chooses someone to be the rep. Vicky is the rep now and has been for a couple of years, and she goes to the meetings, et cetera, and has careful communications with the board about and various committees about what's going on and what we need to keep an eye on. I know, for instance, we value so many of the relationships over there that are very important to us. We just collaborated on a grant application through the state of Maine's COVID Keep Maine Healthy plan. They did 2 grants. We couldn't qualify or couldn't make the deadline for the first one. They came around for the second round of funding, and we have put a proposal in for around $6,000 to be reimbursed for our COVID spending. Much of that is to cover the $5,000 that we did in the emergency meeting to cover the dock supervisor. You may remember that there was a meeting called for that, and we had a very, very close and highly kind of one of the most interesting debates I've seen at the Board of Overseers since I've been part of it, passed by 1 vote. We asked for $5,000. It turns out we have now a chance to get that reimbursed, and we have a very strong application to get that, and much of our signage paid for, around $6,000. That collaboration internally, myself, Steve Kaslonis, Bill Page, Judy Metcalf, And then absolutely critical that the town help us with the process, because we would qualify, Bayside qualifies as, I think the funding goes to municipalities, and we are not quite a municipality the way we're governed or the way we're structured. So we need sign off in that process from Northport, and we got it from them, and they've endorsed our application. And so that is grounded in years of careful relationships, careful collaboration and respect. And that has significant impact for us. The idea that we can have much of what we've spent in the latter part of the summer covered by a state grant. Also, in terms of the ongoing way that we manage and keep an eye on the village-town relationship, you know, the police department, we regularly have to keep an eye on how we patrol and where we patrol and what kind of feedback we're getting around that patrolling, so that we don't end up with our policemen outside the bounds formally of Bayside and then seen as, you know, off the reservation, for lack of a better word. I'm sorry, that's a bad reference. But in terms of, you know, being beyond their jurisdiction. And that came up recently, in fact, and it was a quick communication from Vicki about an agenda item that was on the town's Board of Select People meeting. And we quickly addressed that with our police, just to give them a heads up, a gentle heads up that, remember, we keep an eye on Bayside and watch when you get outside of those bounds, because Northport's very sensitive to it, as they should be. So these are really important issues, and of course, ongoing plowing and winter work that Bill Page is really good at keeping an eye on and you know, interfacing with, has very deep relationships there. So I think it's an overlooked issue, and because it doesn't present front and center when you're down at the dock getting on your boat, or when your kids are playing basketball, or when you're sitting on your porch. But it's one that has direct impact on certainly on our tax base this year.
Thank you. Wendy Huntoon, please.
So I'll just be really brief. And Michael started talking about this a little bit. A lot of the day-to-day interactions between the Village Corporation and the town of Northport is actually through the staff. And so I see as one of the officers, if I was elected as treasurer, my role would be to support the staff in terms of any sort of help they needed in terms of interacting with the town of Northport, or, you know, me providing the information they needed so that they could do their job and interact appropriately with the town of Northport to make sure that the village operations are smooth.
Thank you. Well, we've come a full course of an hour, and if there's no burning question on the floor, I'm inclined to thank the 5 participants, the 5 candidates, very much, both for your candidacy and for your participation this evening. And thanks very much to all of the citizens who've shown up and paid attention and asked questions. I'll remind you that the election is on Tuesday, the 11th of August. The meeting will begin at 5:30. I can't predict what time the election will be. On the basketball court, and I remind you again that you must be present in person to vote at that meeting. So thanks very much to everyone. And could we recognize Judy? Did you want to be recognized? No, okay. Well, thank you very much then.
Thank you,
declare
Bill.
this session to be adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bill. Thanks,
so
everyone.
much, everyone.
Great to see you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.